It was a quiet Thursday morning when Emma's world began to unravel. The sun had barely risen over their quiet suburban street, filtering through the curtains in soft, amber light. She had just poured herself a second cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table with her laptop, ready to get a head start on some work emails. Noah was upstairs, shaving before heading out to a meeting. Everything felt perfectly normal until her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was fate. "Hello," she said, her voice neutral. "Emma?" The voice on the other end was sharp, female, and coolly confident. "This is Olivia, Noah's ex-wife." Emma blinked. "Oh, hi." She wasn't sure how to respond. Noah didn't talk much about Olivia, only that things had ended badly. Emma had seen a photo once in an old box, and that was it. "What can I do for you?" "I don't normally make calls like this," Olivia said briskly, "but I think it's only fair to let you know something important. Your marriage to Noah, it's not legal." Emma let out a confused half-laugh. "Excuse me? You heard me. He never divorced me. Not legally, anyway." The silence that followed was thick and strange. Emma stood slowly from the chair, heart beginning to pound. "That's not possible," she said. "We're married. I've seen the certificate." "Sure," Olivia said. "You probably have a certificate. That doesn't mean it's valid. You might want to check with the county clerk. Our divorce was filed once, but it was never finalized. He never showed up to court. I let it go at the time because I didn't want to deal with him anymore. But legally, I'm still his wife. And if that's true, that makes your marriage, well, something else entirely." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Are you saying Noah committed bigamy?" "I'm saying you might want to look into it before you keep living in that house with a man who's been lying to you for years." With that, Olivia hung up. No angry outburst. No despripli. Just cold, cutting finality. Emma stared at her phone for a long moment, then slowly lowered it to the table. Her coffee had gone cold. She didn't even notice. She climbed the stairs and walked into the bathroom. Noah was at the mirror, shaving cream on his face, halfway through his morning routine. He smiled when he saw her reflection behind him. "Hey, babe, what's up?" Emma didn't answer right away. She studied him, his calm demeanor, the relaxed movements, the confidence of a man who, until 10 minutes ago, had never given her a reason to doubt him. "I just got a call," she said, folding her arms. "From Olivia." His razor froze mid-stroke. "She said you two were never legally divorced, that you never finalized it. Is that true?" Noah turned slowly, his expression shifting through several emotions: confusion, annoyance, and something else she couldn't quite name. "That's ridiculous," he said. "She's just trying to stir things up. You know how she is. I told you. She was always dramatic." "I want the truth," Emma said firmly. "Did you finish the divorce proceedings?" There was a pause. Too long. Then Noah gave a slight shake of the head, as if trying to swat away an invisible fly. "I thought it was done," he muttered. "She said she'd handle it. We signed papers. I didn't realize. Look, maybe something fell through. It was years ago. You didn't realize?" Emma's voice trembled now. "You married me. You stood in front of a minister and said vows, knowing this wasn't finalized?" "I didn't know it wasn't." He snapped. "I thought she filed everything. I never heard back from her or the court. I just assumed." "You assumed," Emma repeated, backing out of the bathroom. "Unbelievable." She walked away, heart racing, breath shallow. She locked herself in the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed. Her mind spun with questions. What did this mean for her? Was their marriage even legal? Were all the decisions they'd made together, buying the house, filing taxes, joint accounts, based on a lie? Her phone buzzed again. A message from Olivia. "If you don't believe me, check court records. Case number 15, D. 973. It's still open. Never closed. Good luck." Emma stared at the message for a long time. She didn't respond. Instead, she began searching online for the county court's public records site. Her hands were shaking as she typed in the case number. The results loaded slowly. Case title: Olivia Carter versus Noah Miller. Filing date: September 18th, 2017. Case status: open disposition. No final judgment. Her vision blurred slightly, and she had to reread the lines 3 times. It was real. Olivia had told the truth. Emma closed the laptop and buried her face in her hands. This wasn't just betrayal. It was legal deception, emotional fraud. She had built her life with a man who had never legally ended his past one. She replayed their wedding day in her mind. How proud he looked in his suit, how sweet his vows had sounded, how he'd kissed her like it was the start of forever. And now she had to face the possibility that it had all been theater based on a lie of omission. That night, Emma didn't speak much. She told Noah she needed time. He didn't press. Maybe he knew better. Maybe he understood, deep down, that no apology could undo the damage. He tried to play it down again, muttering something about clerical errors and paperwork confusion, but Emma no longer trusted his words. She emailed a family attorney the next morning, attaching the court case details and asking for an urgent consultation. In her gut, she knew this wouldn't be simple. She could already feel the cracks forming between them, cracks she wasn't sure could ever be mended. And just like that, with one phone call, Emma's marriage no longer felt like a foundation. It felt like a house of cards built on sand. She had no idea what would come next, but she knew one thing for certain. She had to find the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning began in silence. Emma hadn't slept much. She'd spent most of the night tossing and turning in the guest room, staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed every moment of her relationship with Noah, looking for signs, red flags, anything she might have missed. But there had been none. Or maybe there had been, and she simply didn't want to see them. She waited until the first light of day before getting dressed, skipping breakfast, and leaving the house without saying a word. Noah had stayed in the master bedroom. She'd heard him pacing just as much as she had. Neither of them had the courage to talk. Emma drove across town to the county courthouse. Her heart was pounding the entire way. Her fingers tapped nervously on the steering wheel at every red light. Despite already having seen the online confirmation, she needed something physical, something tangible, official documentation that would either support Olivia's claim or refute it beyond all doubt. She still clung to a thread of hope that maybe this was all some mistake, that Noah had somehow been telling the truth, that some paper was filed late or misplaced. The courthouse was quiet. It always seemed colder than it should be, with that sterile, gray, institutional feel. Emma stepped inside and approached the records window, where a bored-looking clerk in glasses sat behind a plexiglass screen. "Hi, I'm looking for information on a divorce case," she said, trying to sound calm. "Names?" the clerk asked without looking up. "Olivia Carter and Noah Miller. The case number is 15D973. The clerk typed for a few moments, then reached under the desk and produced a thin paper folder. She slid it through the tray and handed Emma a form. "Fill this out. You'll get copies of everything for $15. Cash or card?" Emma's hand trembled as she filled out the form and paid the fee. The woman returned a few minutes later with a stapled packet of documents: petition for divorce, summons issued, proof of service, and then silence. No final decree. No certificate of dissolution. No signed judgment. Emma scanned the final page. The last activity was dated December 7th, 2017. Hearing postponed. Party did not appear. That party was Noah. There it was, in black and white. Olivia had filed. The process had begun, but Noah never followed through, and no one had ever finished it. Her legs felt weak. She sat down on a nearby bench, the paper shaking in her hands. She wasn't just humiliated. She was legally vulnerable. Everything she thought she had, a valid marriage, joint rights, legal protections, was built on nothing. She opened her email app and forwarded the file to the attorney she'd contacted the night before, along with a brief message. "Please confirm whether this affects the legality of my marriage. I am available for a call this afternoon." Less than 20 minutes later, her phone rang. It was Marianne Rhodes, a respected family lawyer in the area. "Emma," Marianne said gently, "I read your message. Unfortunately, I have to confirm what you probably already suspect. If your husband was still legally married to someone else at the time you married him, then your marriage isn't recognized under the law. That's considered bigamy, and it voids the second marriage automatically." Emma pressed her hand to her forehead. "But I have a marriage certificate. Certificates are often issued before background checks are fully completed, Marianne explained, especially if the officiant was not diligent. But in terms of legal status, your marriage isn't valid. That also means you don't currently have spousal rights in terms of property, healthcare decisions, inheritance, or tax status. Emma went cold. So what do I do now? You have a few options, Marianne said. You can file for annulment, which is the legal process for declaring a marriage null due to bigamy. You can also file a civil suit to recover any damages or assets lost under the belief that the marriage was valid. But if you want to stay together, Noah would need to finalize the divorce with Olivia, and you would need to marry again, legally this time. Emma didn't respond right away. Her thoughts were a storm of betrayal, confusion, and quiet rage. Is Noah liable for this? Potentially, Marianne replied. Bigamy is illegal in all 50 states. It's rarely prosecuted criminally unless there was intent to defraud. But you absolutely have grounds to pursue civil action if you choose, especially if there were joint purchases or financial entanglements under false pretenses. Emma hung up the phone, her mind numb. She walked back to her car in a daze and sat behind the wheel for a long time without turning the ignition. It was strange how fast the foundation of your life could be pulled out from beneath you. She had lived with Noah for almost 3 years. She'd trusted him. She'd loved him. Now, she wasn't even legally his wife. She drove home in silence and entered the house without a word. Noah was in the living room, sitting on the couch, his face pale and drawn. He stood when he saw her. I know I messed up. He began immediately. Emma, please. I didn't mean for this to happen. I really thought she filed everything. I thought it was over. Emma threw the packet of records onto the coffee table. She did file. You didn't show up. You just ignored it, Noah. And then you marry me like nothing ever happened. I didn't know. He insisted. I swear to God, I didn't know it wasn't finalized. I just assumed. You assumed? Her voice cracked. You assumed your divorce was final and didn't even check before marrying me? He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. It was a mistake. A stupid, horrible mistake. But I love you. I married you because I wanted to spend my life with you. That part was real. Emma didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But it wasn't real, Noah. Not legally. Not to the state. You made vows to me while you were still married to someone else. You signed mortgage papers. You filed taxes with me. This could be considered fraud. He paled even further. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, she whispered. But I can't stay here right now. She went upstairs, packed a weekend bag, and drove to her sister's place on the other side of town. Her sister, Lydia, welcomed her with a hug, no questions asked. Emma didn't tell her everything that night. She just said she needed space, and Lydia gave it to her. Later that evening, Emma sat on the guest bed and reread the court records again and again, hoping for something, anything, that would make it all feel less real. But every time she reached the last page, it hit her all over again. Her marriage wasn't real, and Noah had let her live a lie for 3 years. She opened a blank note on her phone and began listing out everything they'd done together since their wedding. The home purchase, the car title, the joint savings account, the emergency contact forms, the holidays spent at her parents' house as husband and wife. None of it had legal weight. None of it had protection. She felt exposed, like her life had been built on sand. Emma didn't sleep that night either, but she was no longer crying. She was planning. If Noah wanted to fix this, he would have to do more than apologize. He would have to prove, beyond words, that he was willing to make it right. But even then, Emma wasn't sure anymore if that was what she wanted. For the first time since their wedding, she began to imagine a future without him. And strangely, that idea didn't scare her as much as it did yesterday. Emma stayed with Lydia for 4 days. 4 long, quiet, emotionally draining days where reality settled into her bones like a cold fog that wouldn't lift. Lydia didn't press for details, but she offered gentle support. Tea in the mornings, silent company in the evenings, and the occasional hug when Emma's eyes lingered too long on her phone without responding to Noah's texts. Noah texted constantly at first. At 8 a.m. sharp on the first day, he sent, "Please let me know you're okay." By noon, "I've booked an appointment with a divorce lawyer. I want to fix this." By evening, "Emma, I miss you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'll do anything. Emma read every message but didn't reply. Not yet. She needed clarity, and she wasn't going to find it by jumping back into the life that now felt like a performance. She needed to understand what it all meant legally, financially, emotionally, what it meant to have built a life on paper that might not even exist in the eyes of the law. On the second day, Marianne Rhodes called again. I reviewed all the documents you sent, she said calmly. There's no ambiguity. The marriage certificate you have isn't legally binding because the marriage itself was invalid at the time it was entered. In the state's eyes, you are considered unmarried. Emma sat on Lydia's porch steps, phone pressed to her ear, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the spring warmth. And everything we've done together, the house, the savings account, you may have a legal claim to assets you contributed to in good faith, Marianne said. But it won't be through divorce court. It'll be through civil court. And you'll need to establish that you entered this arrangement believing the marriage was valid and that you suffered damages as a result. Could I sue him? Yes, the lawyer said gently. You could. It wouldn't be a criminal charge unless there's proof of deliberate fraud, but you could pursue a civil claim for restitution or damages. You might also want to consider annulment proceedings. It's the clearest path to legally ending something that was never valid to begin with. Emma closed her eyes. So I'm not a wife. I'm just what? A woman who lived with a man for 3 years under a false promise? I know it's a lot to take in, Marianne replied. But you're not powerless here. You have options. Emma ended the call and sat motionless for a long time, listening to the faint chirping of birds and the occasional hum of passing cars. The world continued to turn, as if her personal devastation was just background noise to everyone else's normal lives. That evening, Lydia finally sat across from her with a serious look. Do you love him? She asked. Emma hesitated. I don't know. I thought I did. I think I still do. But I can't trust him. How do you love someone you can't trust? Lydia reached out and squeezed her hand. Then maybe that's her answer. On the 5th day, Emma returned home. She didn't announce it. She just drove back, walked through the front door, and found Noah in the kitchen, sitting at the table with red-rimmed eyes and a worn-out expression. He looked like he hadn't slept properly since she left. He stood immediately. Emma, thank God. I didn't know if you'd come back. I came back to talk, she said. That's all. He nodded cautiously. They sat at the kitchen table, the same place she'd been when Olivia first called. The memory made her stomach twist. I met with a divorce lawyer, Noah said quickly. I filed everything properly this time. Olivia's signing the papers next week. We're going to get it done. Emma listened, arms crossed. I also spoke with a financial advisor. He continued. I want to make sure you're protected. I know I messed up. I know this hurt you, but I'm trying him. I swear I didn't know the divorce wasn't finalized. I really thought it was done. I don't believe you, she said, her voice calm but cutting. Not completely. Not anymore. Noah's face crumpled. Please. I believe you didn't mean for this to go the way it did. But you didn't care enough to check. You didn't care enough to be sure before you promised me forever. You just assumed. You let me live a lie because it was convenient. I need to reclaim my present. She left that night, not with anger, not with tears, but with the eerie calm that comes after a storm, the kind of calm that follows complete emotional exhaustion. In the weeks that followed, she filed the annulment paperwork. Noah's divorce with Olivia was finally finalized, years after it should have been. Emma didn't attend any of the hearings. Her lawyer handled everything. She didn't sue Noah for damages, though she easily could have. He bowed his head. You're right. Emma inhaled deeply. I'm filing for annulment. I've spoken to my lawyer. We're not married, Noah. Not really. And I don't want to pretend we are. He looked up, devastated. So that's it. I don't know what it is anymore. I need to figure that out on my own. But legally? Yes. That's it. She stood and walked upstairs. The bedroom felt like someone else's life. She pulled out a suitcase and began packing. Noah followed her after a few minutes. Where will you go? My sister's, for now. After that, I'll find a place. I'll manage. Can I call you? He asked quietly. Emma stopped folding clothes and looked at him. I think I need time without you, Noah. Real time. You need to fix your past. Instead, she had the joint accounts closed, her name removed from the mortgage, and she walked away with only what she came into the relationship with, plus lessons she never wanted to learn. Friends and co-workers were stunned. Many had seen them as the perfect couple. Emma gave vague explanations, simply saying they had irreconcilable legal issues. Only Lydia and her lawyer knew the full story. Noah sent her emails from time to time. He apologized in every one. He begged for another chance. He told her he loved her, that he was doing therapy, that he wanted to be the man she thought he was. She didn't reply, until one day, about 2 months later, she received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text, a real letter in Noah's handwriting. It wasn't another apology. It was an acknowledgement, a confession of how carelessness had turned into catastrophe. He thanked her for not destroying him publicly. He said he understood if she never wanted to see him again, but he hoped one day she'd remember him for something other than the mistake he made. Emma placed the letter in a drawer and didn't look at it again for a long time. Instead, she focused on rebuilding. She took a solo trip for the first time in her life, driving up the coast and staying in a small Airbnb by the sea. She listened to the waves. She wrote in a journal. She read books. She breathed. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was living on her own terms. It wasn't the ending she expected when she said "I do," but it was the beginning of something far more important, finally learning to say "I am." 3 months had passed since Emma left Noah. The days no longer blurred together like they had in the first few weeks. The fog that had clouded her thinking slowly began to lift, replaced by something clearer, sharper, and, surprisingly, stronger. Emma had moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much, a modest walk-up with creaky floors and old cabinets, but it was hers. There was a small balcony that caught the sunset just right, and that became her favorite spot to sit with a cup of tea and a book, watching the sky burn orange as day turned into night. She no longer flinched when someone mentioned marriage or love. That panic had faded, replaced by a quiet caution, like the scar from a wound that no longer hurt but never quite disappeared. People had stopped asking questions. The gossip eventually burned itself out. Most assumed she and Noah had simply fallen out of love. Few knew the truth, and that was how she wanted it. The annulment was finalized 2 weeks earlier. The papers arrived in a plain manila envelope with the state seal stamped at the top. A single line confirmed it all. The marriage is hereby declared null and void due to the legal existence of a prior, undissolved marriage. She had read it once, then placed it in a folder marked personal and slid it into a filing cabinet. She didn't need to look at it again. That chapter was closed. But closure doesn't always mean the end of something. Sometimes it's the beginning of understanding. Emma had spent those months quietly reflecting on her part in everything. She didn't blame herself for Noah's deception, but she did recognize how quickly she had fallen into the role of wife, partner, caregiver, without ever pausing to ask deeper questions. She had been in love with the idea of love, with the picture of a life, rather than the full truth beneath it. She had also started therapy. Once a week, she sat with a woman named Karen, who wore warm sweaters and spoke in a tone that was neither pitying nor clinical. It helped. Talking helped. Peeling back the layers of confusion and betrayal helped. For the first time, Emma began to untangle not just what had happened to her, but why she had tolerated it for as long as she did. One afternoon in mid-June, Emma received another letter from Noah. It was shorter than the first. This time, there were no apologies, no desperate pleas. Just a simple update. I wanted to let you know that I finalized everything with Olivia. She's remarried now. We had one final conversation and then agreed to never speak again. I also started attending group therapy for men dealing with accountability and emotional maturity. I don't expect anything from you, Emma. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to become better. Not to win you back, but because I should have been better in the first place. Emma read it twice. There was something different about this letter. For the first time, she sensed sincerity that wasn't wrapped in self-pity or desperation. It didn't change anything, but made her feel seen, as though he finally understood the full depth of what he'd done and what she'd lost. She folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the first. Later that evening, Lydia came over. They cooked dinner together, and sat on the floor with glasses of wine, laughing about their awkward teenage years and embarrassing dates. When Lydia eventually asked, "Have you heard from Noah?" Emma nodded, but didn't elaborate. "Do you think you'll ever see him again?" Lydia asked. Emma thought about that for a moment. Maybe one day by accident, in a grocery store or a bookstore. And if that happens, I'll be okay. I won't run. I won't cry. I'll just smile and walk on. And she meant it. That night, Emma took out her journal and wrote something she hadn't been able to write before. "I was never legally a wife, but I gave everything like I was. That doesn't make me foolish. That makes me brave. Loving someone without guarantees is always brave. Leaving when you realize you deserve more is even braver." In July, she began volunteering at a local women's legal resource center. She helped organize paperwork, answered phones, and eventually started sitting in on workshops for women navigating divorces and annulments. She didn't share her own story. Not yet, but she saw it echoed in the women who came in, trembling and uncertain, asking questions like, "Am I allowed to leave? And will I be okay on my own?" She always wanted to answer, "Yes, you will." One particularly hot afternoon, Emma was organizing brochures in the lobby when a woman around her age walked in, visibly shaken. She explained to the receptionist that she'd just found out her husband was married to someone else in another state. Her voice cracked when she said, "I don't even know who I am anymore." Emma looked up from her pile of pamphlets. Their eyes met. She walked over, offered a soft smile, and gently handed the woman a glass of water. "Take a breath," Emma said quietly. "I've been exactly where you are, and I promise you'll find your way through this." That moment became a turning point, not just for the woman, but for Emma. She realized she didn't have to erase what had happened to her. She didn't have to hide it like a shameful scar. She could use it. She could own it. And maybe, just maybe, she could help others heal too. By August, she'd been asked to speak at a small panel hosted by the center, a discussion on financial and legal vulnerability in relationships. She almost said no. The idea of speaking publicly about something so personal felt terrifying. But then she remembered that phone call in her kitchen, the one that shattered her illusion of safety, and how alone she had felt in the days that followed. She said yes. The night of the panel, she wore a simple navy blue dress and clasped her shaking hands behind the podium. She started with the facts, how she'd met someone she loved, how they married, and how she later discovered he was still married to someone else. She spoke about the legal process, the annulment, and the emotional fallout. But then she spoke about something more important, the quiet rebuilding of a life after the collapse of a dream. When we think of betrayal, she told the room, we often imagine anger, confrontation, maybe revenge. But sometimes the most powerful response is to choose yourself without noise, to walk away without burning everything down, to build a new life not out of bitterness, but from the courage to begin again. After the panel, several women came up to her, eyes wet, voices trembling, thanking her. One even asked if she could email her sometime just to talk. Emma gave her the address. When she got home that night, she sat on the balcony under the stars and realized something unexpected. She felt proud, not of what had happened, but of who she had become because of it. There was a quiet, solid strength inside her now. It had been forged in heartbreak, in confusion, in the quiet nights alone with only the sound of her own breath for company. But it was real, and it was hers. A few weeks later, she bumped into Noah in a bookstore. It was almost cinematic how it happened. She was flipping through a hardcover on self-healing, and he was in the next aisle, reading something about leadership. They made eye contact. He froze for a moment, then smiled softly. "Hey," he said. "Hey." They spoke for a few minutes, small talk, polite and measured. He looked healthier, calmer. There was a sadness in his eyes, but also something lighter. He asked how she was, and she said she was doing well. Better, actually. As she turned to leave, he called after her. "Emma, I'm glad to see you happy." She paused and nodded. "I am, really." She walked out into the bright afternoon sunlight, not feeling sadness or loss, but peace. Peace in knowing that while the past had changed her, it hadn't broken her. She had reclaimed her story. And this time, she was the one holding the pen.